It's good.
Okay, sounds good. Testing. All right. Wow, I am very happy to have all of you come and join us today for a very cool talk. My name is Anna. I'm one of the park rangers here, and I am happy to welcome both Aubrey Paris and Emily Black and their program, the National Treasure Hunt, here to Congress Hall. Now, I work here, 5 days a week, and I think all of my coworkers and I can say that just about every day we get people asking about National Treasure, right? They want to know where Nicolas Cage was running across the roof. They want to know where the Declaration is, the bifocals. And so you can tell that people are still very much in love and excited about these movies. Now, I'm looking forward today to hearing both of these talk about what is accurate, what is inaccurate, some of the little history tidbits for the time that we're meeting here. But I do want to just say, in case anyone needs the restroom, please see the ranger that will be at the back of the room. And our emergency exits are going to be either out that door and down the steps, or out the door that we came in. There will be a lamp out that way. But let's start off by giving these two a hand and welcoming them to Congress Hall.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you to Independence National Historical Park and the trust for having us here today. We're so thrilled to be here. My name is Aubrey Paris.
I'm Emily Black.
And we are National Treasure Hunt, the podcast, book, and tour taking an ocular device to the National Treasure film franchise. We're really excited to be here today celebrating the 20th anniversary of National Treasure.
Is that crazy or what?
Yeah.
Okay, same.
I can tell that was the first time some of you heard that it was the 20th anniversary.
Well, what we have prepared for you here today, we're going to start with an interactive lecture of sorts. We'll follow that up by answering all of your burning National Treasure questions. I hope someone asked us about National Treasure 3.
That's definitely not a hint to do so, but
We could. And then we'll wrap things up by signing copies of our book, National Treasure Hunt, One Step Short of Crazy, which is available for purchase from our friends here at the Independence National Historical Park gift shop. So we clearly have a lot to get to today. I think we should probably just jump right in and maybe start by addressing the elephant in the room.
yes. So, can I just get a raise of hands? Who here has seen National Treasure, the first film?
Woo!
Okay, I was a little nervous about that. I feel like there's always one person, but cool. Okay, this one, how about many people have seen the second film?
Yes.
Okay, so like same amount, honestly. That's fantastic. So I thought we would start by telling you a little bit about how the film's conception originated. So story writer Charles Seegers actually visited the National Archives in 1990 to do research in developing a Lewis and Clark miniseries, if you can believe it. Now, when he was there, he noticed that there was a lack of line outside the archives, and a lack of line specifically to see the Declaration of Independence and other charters of freedom. And while he was there, he learned about the faded condition of the Declaration and all the conservation efforts, which we're all very thankful for, right, that are underway to keep the document in viewing condition. And he kind of thought, well, one, how do I get people in line? How do I form a line for people to see this? And two, what might the Declaration of Independence need to be protected from?
Or who?
And that is how National Treasure really originated.
Yeah, so National Treasure, of course, came to the public in November of 2004, and it ended up grossing $350 million against a $100 million budget. It was really a huge success for Disney, and frankly, one that they were not expecting. So, very soon after those numbers came in, Disney greenlit a sequel, and National Treasure 2: Book of Secrets premiered 3 years later in December of 2007. It actually outperformed its predecessor, grossing $460 million worldwide. Now, National Treasure fans and aficionados, which we clearly saw all of you qualify, will remember that Philadelphia, but also Independence National Historical Park, they both feature quite prominently in the first National Treasure film. So that's really what we're going to focus our talk on today. But in order for us to do that, I think we should all quickly revisit the plot of the first film. In case you need a refresher, it's been a minute since you watched the movie. I don't know about you, I watched it on USA Network last night, but you know, if you weren't me.
Or, I mean, well, no, I didn't watch it either, so.
Okay, well, you need a refresher too.
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
truly.
So, in case you've forgotten, National Treasure is the story of the Gates family, a fictional family that has been searching for the lost legendary Templar treasure for centuries. Now, National Treasure purports that the Templar treasure was amassed in Europe by the Knights Templar and transported here, hidden here in the United States by our founding fathers who were Freemasons. Now, when National Treasure kicks off at the beginning of the film in the present day, we meet our protagonist, Benjamin Franklin Gates, aka Nicolas Cage. And we see Ben discover, or uncover really, a long lost ship in the Arctic Circle, and his next treasure hunt clue, a pipe, is on that ship. That clue leads him to Washington, D.C., where he must investigate the Declaration of Independence to find his next clue, a cipher on the back. To crack that cipher, he must travel here to Philadelphia, to the Franklin Institute, to examine the Silence Dogood letters, and that is how he will crack his cipher. Once that cipher is cracked, he comes here to Independence National Historical Park, specifically Independence Hall next door, to find his next clue, which ultimately leads him to discover that the legendary Templar treasure is buried beneath the historic Trinity Church in New York City. And spoiler alert, he does find the treasure.
Yeah. And since you all said you've seen the movie.
Hopefully it's not much of a spoiler. Absolutely. So that is the story of National Treasure. It really does center around this main heist, if you will. And that heist is what leads us right here to Philadelphia. So in order to talk about the Philadelphia scenes, I do feel like we need to take a moment to collectively revisit how that heist got started. So to do that, we're gonna need a volunteer. All right, we're gonna need a volunteer, someone who is willing to recreate a National Treasure scene with Emily. You will play Ben Gates, Emily will play sidekick Riley Poole. We have a script for you to read from, so no pressure at all. We basically just need someone who's always wanted to know what it's like to be Nicolas Cage. Raise your hand. Someone, anyone. Someone.
I see a hand,
Okay, come on up, sir.
Yeah, oh yeah. Sir, what is your name?
Benjamin Franklin Gates.
Oh, fantastic, amazing, yes, clap. Okay, so we have Benjamin Franklin Gates here, and we are gonna reenact a scene together. So Ben, please feel free to take it away and be as charismatic as you wish to be.
He's kind of known for deadpan, though.
Do that.
180 years of searching, and I'm 3 feet away. Of all the words written here about freedom, there's a line that's at the heart of all the others. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. I won't talk that way anymore.
Beautiful. No idea what you just said.
It means if there's something wrong, those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. I'm going to steal it.
What?
I am going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
Woo!
Okay, big round of applause, everyone. Fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, really were Ben Gates right there.
Yeah, I felt like I was in the film.
And just like that, you guys, we have the most infamous, memorable heist of early 2000s cinema, if I do say so myself. But, you know, jokes aside, we're online. We're on social media. We've seen the memes, people laughing at, I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence, I'm gonna kidnap the President of the United States in the second movie, or frankly, memes of Nick Cage being Nick Cage. And we get it. People think these heists are funny, and they are entertaining. They make the movies so rewatchable. They're the reason we're still here talking about them 20 years later today. But what we hope to demonstrate to you this afternoon is that the creators of National Treasure were actually quite clever when planning their heists, injecting myriad real-world elements into those heists to make the impossible seem plausible. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna walk through just a few scenes from National Treasure, either leading up to the scenes in Philly or taking place here in Philly, and we're gonna explain to you how the creators used history, science, ciphers, and just a hint of Hollywood movie magic to create fan favorite films that we know and love today. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, let's start where I think everyone thinks to start when they're thinking about National Treasure, and that's got to be the history.
The history, yeah. And so, I mean, let's all take a moment and just recognize that the Declaration of Independence was signed right in that building, right over there.
Right next door.
Right next door, literally. So, the Declaration of Independence was drafted by Thomas Jefferson in 1776. It was read, debated, and signed, more broadly speaking, at Independence National Historical Park. And, I think it's important to note that to this day, there actually is a reenactment of this, Aubrey. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay, so the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence occurred on July 8th, 1776, right out in the square outside. And Independence National Historical Park actually does a reenactment of that every year. So if you're around in just a couple days, feel free to check it out because that's awesome and we're very thankful that they continue to reenact that for us. And so the Declaration of Independence itself was signed by 55 individuals. Now,
Immediately.
Immediately-ish. Now, for those of you who are remembering, parts of the film, Ben's first clue that he gets in his actual treasure hunt is on the meerschaum pipe, and it has the words 55 in iron pen. You kind of remember-ish, maybe? Okay. Well, he correctly points out that that has to do with the Declaration of Independence. And it is true that 55 people did sign the Declaration of Independence. And for those of you out there who are like very savvy history people, you might be thinking, okay, it was actually 56, which you are correct. And for those of you who have someone next to you who is like nodding very pleasantly, like go ahead and give them a pat on the back or a thumbs up because they knew that. That is great. And so 55 people signed the Declaration around August 3rd of 1776. But it actually wasn't until between the years of 1777 and 1781 that the 56th signer of the Declaration actually signed the document. And this person was named Thomas McKean. He was from Delaware. So, although there are 56 signers, we do like to point out this intentional choice that the writers of the film made in that the 55 people that signed the Declaration would have done so at the time the cipher would have been written on the back of the document itself in the film. So it all lines up in that way, which is amazing. Now I do have to tell you, and I'm so sorry if I break anyone's heart in this moment, there is not a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. Okay?
Darn.
Yeah, I just want to make it 100% clear. However, there is writing on the back, and Ben Gates does correctly point this out in the film. Right, so on the back is inscribed Original Declaration of Independence, dated 4th July, 1776. And the main purpose for this was honestly so that when the Declaration was rolled up and carried around during the Revolutionary War, at 1776 time period, that people were able to see that it was the Declaration, so keep it safe and all that kind of stuff. So there is writing there, just not a treasure map.
Speaking of the back, I do want to point out that, of course, Ben Gates does come here to Independence National Historical Park a bit later in the film. We'll get to that in more detail a bit later. But what leads him here is the belief that he will find one of his treasure hunt clues at Independence Hall at a specific time of day, right? And he determines what time of day by looking at the back of a $100 bill where there is an etching of Independence Hall and its clock tower. Now, Ben is very confident that this is the right interpretation of this clue because he says that the person who created that etching of Independence Hall was a friend of Benjamin Franklin's. By show of hands, who thinks that that is correct? Who thinks that the etching was done by a friend of Benjamin Franklin's? Okay, we got a couple tentative hands. It's actually not a simple answer, right? Let's examine this. So, the $100 bill that was in circulation in 2003 when the film was produced does in fact have an Independence Hall etching on the back, and that etching was done by a man named J.C. Bensing in the 1920s. It was based on a photograph. Now, I'm sorry to say that Benjamin Franklin died more than a century before that, so no, Franklin and Bensing were not friends. However, most people are surprised to learn that there is a connection between Ben Franklin, a different piece of US currency, and Independence Hall. To explain what I mean by that, I'm going to need everyone to very quickly feel under your seats. Someone has something under their seat, or maybe even check the seat next to you if you do not feel anything, if you're next to an empty chair. Whoever has it, can you raise your hand? Sir, there you are, wonderful. I'm gonna ask you to just shout out. First, what's your name, sir?
Taylor.
Taylor, all right, Taylor, what do you have?
A $2 bill.
It is a $2 bill. Can you flip it over and describe what you see on the back?
A bunch of people, signs and stuff.
Yeah, based on where we're at, do you have a guess of what they might be signing?
Probably declaration.
Indeed.
Probably, yeah.
All right, so thank you so much,
thank
Taylor.
You can keep that as well.
So, on the back of the $2 bill is a picture that depicts the signing of the Declaration of Independence in Independence Hall's assembly room. That image is based on a painting. That painting was done in the 1780s by a man named John Trumbull, who was a Revolutionary War veteran. As an artist, he's most known for painting images of the war, but he did actually paint this one as well. And it turns out that John Trumbull was introduced to his European artist mentor by none other than Benjamin Franklin. Okay? So it turns out that when Ben Gates is making this reference to a friend of Ben Franklin's creating this etching of Independence Hall in the 1780s, this is actually what the creators of National Treasure are referring to. They're just kind of switching which bill they're talking about. A great example, I personally think, of how pretty much every clue in National Treasure is at least inspired by something in history.
And you can challenge us on that when we get to the Q&A
For
portion,
sure.
please. If there's one that you're thinking 100% not it, ask us and we will explain it.
So that is our history lesson for the day. Let's move on to a subject that Emily and I both hold very close to our hearts as trained scientists. Let's talk science, okay? So there's actually quite a bit of science in the National Treasure heist. I think the best example, or my favorite example, is probably when our protagonists are revealing the cipher on the back of the Declaration. They say this cipher is written in invisible ink. Now, probably not a surprise to anyone, invisible inks are very real, right? Invisible inks in general are just based on the premise that you have your ink is one chemical and it will react with another chemical or a reagent in a chemical reaction that induces some sort of color change, rendering what was once invisible visible, right? So in National Treasure, Ben and his father Patrick assert that whatever's written on the back of the Declaration of Independence is probably written in ferrous sulfate invisible ink. Probably because these inks were commonly used during the Revolutionary War period. So they go about revealing the ink using a reagent combination of lemon juice and heat. Now, as a chemist, I'm very sorry to report that you do not reveal ferrous sulfate invisible inks with lemon juice and heat. You reveal them with a chemical known as potassium ferricyanide, okay? Now, also as a chemist, I am very confident in saying that you do not have a bottle of potassium ferricyanide lying around your house, probably for good reason, but you are far more likely to have some lemons and maybe a hairdryer. So, the creators of National Treasure very likely made this artistic choice, if you will, to draw the audience in and make you feel like you can participate in this heist in this moment. It's really at this stage, though, that I do like to point out that, interestingly enough, lemon juice is itself an invisible ink. Does anyone know what you reveal lemon juice ink with? You could shout it out if you have a guess. No?
I think I heard, did somebody say something?
Baking powder?
Somebody said heat.
The answer is heat. Yeah. The way this works is actually the lemon juice is basically it's comprised of organic carbon-containing molecules, compounds. When they're exposed to heat, they begin to oxidize. Basically, they begin to burn, creating that brown color. That's our color change that we're looking for. Now, this does mean that Ben's assumption that the invisible cipher is written in ferrous sulfate is really a bold assumption. Because if he had guessed wrong and the message was instead written in, say, lemon juice, he would have completely erased the centuries-old cipher. Would have been bad.
Would have been very, very bad. So, the part of the science I'm going to talk about has a little less to do with my own degree. Aubrey's a chemist, so she, has that. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm not going to analyze the psyches of these people. But I want to talk about how technology and science interact, specifically when it comes to the preservation and the conservation efforts that are taken for charters of freedom and historical documents. In the case of National Treasure, we're talking about the Declaration of Independence, right? Now, I'm sure many people, right, are familiar with the liberties taken, the methods of questionable legality taken with the handling of the Declaration of Independence throughout the film. Ben and his companions really do turn these normal conservation and preservation efforts on their head. And so what I thought that we would take a minute to do, just to kind of get a little more interactive here, is I want to see if you all would be better at handling the Declaration of Independence than Ben Gates was, okay? I feel like the answer is probably yes.
I feel like the answer is definitely
Yeah.
yes.
So, what's going to happen is I'm going to list a couple things that happened to the Declaration during the film. And I want to see first a raise of hands as if you think this is a good way to treat the document. Yeah, you can do thumbs up, thumbs down. And then go ahead and yell out why you think this is a bad strategy.
Or a good one.
Or a good one. Some of them might be good. You never know. So do you all feel ready for that?
For the challenge?
Okay. Thank you for the clapping. Yes, that gives me confidence. Okay, so first things first. Rolling up the document numerous times.
Resoundingly
Okay,
bad.
resounding no. And why do we think no?
Brittle for sure. It could make some of the barely visible. Yeah, well, it also, the ink will continue to chip off. There's just so much wrong with this.
Yes. Okay. So next, we see Ben Gates take the document out of its encasing, and he's wearing some white gloves. What about handling the Declaration with white gloves? We think good, bad?
All right, we're seeing a little bit of
Okay,
both.
mixed reaction here. Okay.
Okay, any idea why that might be good or bad? Want to shout anything out?
So the oil in your fingers.
Oil.
If you wash your hands, you're good, and the gloves, you can't get the feel, and you're going to snag it on ink chips and stuff.
It's a good call. I also saw a hand here. Did you want to share?
Yes, you said you don't do the fabric either. You said
Fabric.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of people don't know that you don't handle antique documents with gloves. It does reduce dexterity and cause a number of problems that Ben Gates here pointed out to us.
Especially fabric gloves.
Yes.
Okay, so what about laying the Declaration flat on a kitchen table?
I better see all thumbs down here.
Somebody's giving me a half thumbs. I'm not going to point you out, but I saw it.
What damage could that do? I mean,
Stain. At least it's flat. Fair.
yeah, we're talking stains, food residue, potential contamination, or introduction of ants and pests. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's furniture
Furniture polish, absolutely.
Okay, so then what about putting lemon juice directly on the document?
Hard no.
Hard no.
Yeah, more stickiness, more
Stickiness,
residue,
yeah.
shrinkage and distortion of the parchment.
How about heating it with a hair dryer?
You guys are crushing
You're
this.
doing great.
More shrinkage, distortion issues. Basically, any abrupt change in humidity, temperature, wetness, very, very bad.
Yeah, not good for antiques, historical documents, anything like that. Okay, so last one here. Y'all have done amazing so far. What about touching the document with bare hands? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay,
All right.
I see a mix.
And I also see a fewer people because I can tell you're scared. It turns out that of all the things they do to the Declaration and National Treasure, this is probably the best of them all. Because as long as your hands are clean and dry, this is the preferred method of handling historical documents.
So if you do handle the Declaration of Independence, do it with bare hands.
That are clean and dry.
That are clean and dry. But let's, can we all agree to leave that to the experts, or I guess Ben Gates?
Because for some reason his movie magic.
Yeah, he was
works
fine.
out.
He was fine.
Okay, thanks for entertaining us there with our science conversation. Let's move on to ciphers. How about?
Ciphers, yes. Okay, so this is where I kind of have my little nerd out moment because I just think ciphers are the coolest thing in the world. So just as a reminder, what Ben and the gang really end up revealing on the back of the Declaration of Independence when they do this lemon juice hairdryer combo is an Ottendorf cipher, right? It is said in the film that it is an Ottendorf cipher. Now, I know we kind of passed the history part a little bit, but I do want to touch on it just a tiny bit. So an Ottendorf cipher is actually a form of a book cipher, okay? They were created around 1526, and they were named after Major Nicholas Dietrich, Baron de Ottendorf. See where the name came from. Okay, so Nicholas, Nick, if he doesn't mind me calling him that, which, I mean, he's definitely not alive anymore, so. He was a German mercenary who actually worked with the Continental Congress during the Revolutionary War. And what that means is that, temporally speaking, the Ottendorf cipher definitely could have been put on the back of the Declaration, not to mention that the usage of the Ottendorf cipher actually saw an uptick during the time of the Revolutionary War because it was a great way to send messages that were encoded to other people during that time period. Okay, so we did the history. Now let's talk about like the cool stuff, the cipher itself. So with this, we have two main components. Okay, we have a ciphertext, which is basically a combination of 3 distinct numbers. And then we have a key text, okay? Now, the key text is where the cipher really kind of gets tricky. And that's because the key text is what is used to decode the cipher itself. Now, both the person who creates the cipher and the person trying to decode the cipher need the same exact copy of the, or version, I guess, of the key text in order for it to not be just gibberish. So during the time when this cipher was, really in its heyday, a common thing that many people had were Bibles. And if you don't know, there are many different versions of Bibles. So if you were trying to decode a cipher where the key text was a Bible, you had to make sure you had the same exact version as the person who created the cipher, which made things a little tricky, I think.
Absolutely. So in National Treasure,
Thank you.
In National Treasure, our key text is not a Bible, it is the Silence Do-Good letters, which Riley Poole finds at the Franklin Institute here in Philadelphia. Now, I like to always quickly revisit the story of the Silence Do-Good letters because I think it's a great example of how National Treasure really exploits historical mysteries.
In a good way.
In a very good way. Because it also turns out that like 98% of the Silence Do-Good story told in National Treasure is true. So that story goes something like this. Everyone's favorite Philadelphian, Ben Franklin, not actually from Philly, he's actually from Boston, Sorry about that. At the age of 12 in Boston, Ben Franklin goes to work as an apprentice to his brother James Franklin. James is the editor of a colonial newspaper called the New England Courant. Now, the Courant is a fairly unique newspaper at the time. It's one of the only ones publishing critical takes on politics, religion, and other topics. And this really intrigues a young Ben Franklin. He really wants to write these sorts of articles, but no one takes him seriously because he's just a kid. So, between the ages of 15 and 16, Ben Franklin takes it upon himself to write 14 letters to the editor of the New England Courant under the pseudonym Mrs. Silence Dogood. Mrs. Silence Dogood purports to be the widow of a minister, and she's got a lot of opinions. Opinions that we would probably call hot takes today. Those hot takes are on topics ranging from the quality of education in colonial America to the fact that she thinks religious people are hypocrites. And so the readership of the New England Courant, these are letters to the editor after all, they get to read these letters and they are eating them up, right? They think these are so wonderful. They're waiting with bated breath for the next one. And when that 14th letter comes and goes with no 15th letter in sight, the readers kind of forced James Franklin to publish a notice in the paper looking for proof of life for Mrs. Silence Dogood. They're really worried about her well-being. And it's at this point that Ben Franklin needs to come clean. And he does, and pretty much everyone who finds out what he did thinks it's pretty funny. With one notable exception, James Franklin. James was said to be so furious at Ben that in a fit of rage, he burned the original Silence Dogood letters, which is why you cannot go to the Franklin Institute or frankly anywhere and see the original letters today. But they were published in the newspaper, so we at least know what they said.
Yes.
Now, I do like to always point out, this is, like I alluded to before, a wonderful example of how National Treasure uses basically events or moments in history that have a question mark at the end, or a little blank that can be filled in with their own story, and to put a little twist on it. In this case, there's no proof that James burnt the letters, or all of the letters, so who's to say one of them, two of them, all 14 of them didn't show up in the back of a desk drawer in the Courant newsroom. So that is, I think, a fun example of how National Treasure likes to use history. But again, I digress a little bit. We're done history. We're talking ciphers. And so Riley Poole uses the Silence Dogood letters to crack the Ottendorf cipher on the Declaration. And we thought it would be really fun to teach you how to crack an Ottendorf cipher today so that you could go home with a new skill to put on your resume.
Because everybody's going to hire you after that.
Yes.
100%, right?
So, I'm going to ask you guys to take out the sheet that you received when you came in and look at the side that has some numbers on it.
Number side. Okay. So, when we're looking at an Ottendorf cipher, remember I said the three numbers, really important, okay? In a traditional Ottendorf cipher, the first number, in this case let's say 4, is a reference to the page of your key text on which the cipher can be found. And the second number refers to the line on that page, and the third number, so this would be that 20, is going to be the letter in that line. Now, as Aubrey just explained with the Silence Dogood letters, in the movie, the first number, rather than being like a page of a book, was the number 1 through 14 of the Silence Dogood letters. There are other versions of how this can be done, and that's actually the one that we're going to be using today, which is where the first number actually corresponds to the paragraph. So in this case, you have one page. If you go ahead and flip over your page, right, you only have one page of text, hopefully. So the first number is going to correspond to the paragraph. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that the little excerpt that you have here is from the Declaration of Independence, because we're here and why not?
Right. So we're going to issue you guys a challenge. We want to know if you can join Ben Gates' treasure hunt team by cracking this Ottendorf cipher. We're going to give you just a few minutes. The challenge is on. You can use your phone to kind of keep track of things. We also have some pencils. If you would like, just raise your hand and we'll hand one to you. But The challenge is on. Good luck, you guys.
Okay.
Clock is ticking.
Some of y'all definitely have amazing memories because you're just doing this without a pencil or a phone.
We're gonna give you about another minute and a half. Did we mention this was a speed test? Based on the laughter, I'm thinking some people have gotten it.
Yeah, I see some hands too.
All right,
Yeah.
10 more seconds, you guys.
Find that last letter.
And stop, I guess?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a pause. How many people think they have it? Raise their hand. Ooh,
Whoa!
all right. In unison, on 3, 2, 1, I want you to call out what you got. 3, 2, 1. Woo!
Good job. Give yourselves a hand.
You could totally join Ben Gates' treasure hunting team.
Yeah, and they definitely did not, Riley did not solve or cipher that fast. So, y'all are doing better than he is.
Absolutely. Well done, everyone. So as we start wrapping up our conversation today, I think we should take a look at what tends to be a fan favorite piece of National Treasure Hunt, which is some Hollywood movie magic. I think we need to tell you a little bit about how filming happened right here at Independence National Historical Park, because contrary to popular belief, almost every scene in National Treasure that purports to take place in or around Independence Hall actually does. Now, a lot of people think that the Independence Hall scenes in National Treasure were filmed at Knott's Berry Farm, which is a theme park in California that just so happens to boast a full-size replica of Independence Hall. Well, it turns out only one scene in National Treasure was filmed at Knott's Berry Farm. And that scene is when our protagonists are in the assembly room, they call it the signing room, and they're examining the back of the Declaration with the Benjamin Franklin ocular device, right? That took place at Knott's Berry Farm. Every other scene, inside, outside, on Independence Hall, actually was filmed here. So yes, that does mean Nicolas Cage did walk across the roof of Independence Hall.
That's an appropriate reaction.
That's what we were expecting. Actually, at one point, the production team was trying to get all their contingency plans in place, and so they actually asked for permission to have Nick Cage's character jump off of the roof of Independence Hall. And for better or worse, I'll let you decide which, that request was denied. So yes, they did film on the roof. They also filmed in the bell tower at Independence Hall, which is really hard to access. We've tried.
Oh, we have tried. Like, we've asked. We haven't just gone up ourselves. To be clear.
So it's not just the protagonists, Ben, Riley, and Abigail that end up in the bell tower. Classic National Treasure fashion is to have our villains be one step behind Ben at all times. So our villains, Ian Howe, played by Sean Bean, and his primary henchman, Shaw, played by David Diane Fisher, also ended up filming in the bell tower. Now we do have a fun little behind-the-scenes story of our villains and their experience in the bell tower. But for this one, our park rangers might want to cover their ears. You've been warned. So, it was 2003. And, when filming is happening, especially in the bell tower, the mechanism that is used to, ring the bell at Independence Hall is turned off because it would totally disrupt filming. So Sean Bean, David Diane Fisher, they're hanging out in the bell tower. For some reason, filming is taking a little bit longer that day, so they're kind of bored. And they thought it would be funny to try to ring the bell themselves. But the bell's pretty heavy, so they couldn't just like push it and make it move. So they wedged their backs up against the wall, put their feet on the bell, and used their collective effort to make the bell ring. And they do so successfully. Now, this startles, I think you could say, the park rangers who were on site that day. And one of them comes rushing up to the bell tower, kind of freaked out, in a panic, saying, "Oh my gosh, the bell just rang. Is everything okay? What happened?" And it's at this point that Sean Bean and David Diane Fisher look at each other, and then they look at the park ranger and say, "I have no idea what you're talking about. The bell didn't ring. You must be hallucinating." And so that is the story of how two very British actors rang a very American bell.
And I do take some comfort, and I've looked at some park rangers' faces, and they did not, I don't know if they were hiding it well, but they didn't seem really surprised about this, so like, cool.
Maybe they've listened to our podcast.
Oh, maybe, yeah. We did have him on, David Diane Fisher on, and he told us that on the podcast, to be fair. Okay, but we're at Independence Hall. We're talking about a bell. We have to talk about the Liberty Bell, right? So, as it's happened, construction of the Liberty Bell Center, right? I hope you all take the time to visit there today. It's very cool. It was completed in 2003, and that happened to be when the filming took place here at Independence National Historical Park. Now, construction had just finished, so they did not have time to move the Liberty Bell to its new home. And those of you who are remembering the film might say, okay, well, there's a bell there, right? So what happened? Believe it or not, this bell was a very well-designed styrofoam replica of the Liberty Bell. Styrofoam.
Check that out the next time you watch the movie.
And the rationale was it would have been too heavy to carry if it was not just like styrofoam. But yeah, so that occurred. Very interesting. We have asked about the whereabouts of the styrofoam bell, you know, just out of curiosity, not at all, because we would want it in our own homes. But we, you know, nobody knows where it is, conveniently. So, however, you know, we talked about Independence Hall, we talked about the Liberty Bell Center, we even talked about the Franklin Institute, but those are not the only Philadelphia adjacent, or Philadelphia really, locations in the film, right? So in the first National Treasure film, we also get a little tour of some other places, including Reading Terminal Market, right? We got City Hall, and we also have the cemetery outside Old Pine Church. Some of you who know the geography of Philadelphia might be, you know, questioning how they got from one place to another, right? Yeah, that's a big one we hear about.
Movie magic.
Yeah, truly movie magic. I mean, especially Abigail and Riley, though, like that one is a little, they're the ones that end up at Reading Terminal Market. So this is actually a really good example of something that we have talked to the creators of the film about, that they wanted to make sure happened in the films, which is they wanted to really showcase all different areas in these historically relevant towns and cities. So even though the geography, you know, doesn't quite make sense logistically, especially if you're on foot, you, the viewer, right, got to see all of these places portrayed in the film itself, which was ultimately what the creators were hoping for.
It's honestly one of my favorite parts about the franchise as a whole, because the creators really do take it upon themselves to make it so that, you know, if you haven't been to these locations before, you get a sense of what they're like. That's why they do on-location filming as much as they possibly can. They want to inspire you to visit, much like the story at the beginning of Charles Seeger's wanting folks to visit the Charters of Freedom at the National Archives. And if you don't ever get a chance to go there in your life, at least you have kind of seen what it's like through the lens of these fun characters. So with that, we just went through some history, science, some ciphers, and some movie magic for just a couple of scenes in the first National Treasure film. And it turns out you can do this kind of analysis for every scene in both National Treasure films. And that is exactly what we do in our book, National Treasure Hunt, One Step Short of Crazy. So we talk about more history and science and ciphers. Some of my favorites on the history side, we talk about the history of locations like Mount Vernon and Mount Rushmore, which feature in National Treasure 2. And then we tell you how they did actually film at these sites and all the challenges that they faced in doing so. On the science side, goodness, during the Declaration heist, Ben interacts with fingerprints and fingerprint exposure techniques multiple times. We walk you through whether those techniques would have worked, why or why not. And even beyond the topics we talked about today, in our book we explain how the musical score contributes to the plots. We talk about the ethics of character decisions and so much more. So we hope this conversation today has intrigued you to dive just a little bit deeper into the National Treasure franchise, whether that may be by listening to our podcast, reading our book, or joining us on our biannual walking tour in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and you can find out more about all those things on our social media. So we have a Twitter and an Instagram where we are at NT Hunt Podcast, and we also have a website where you can find all this information as well. That is nthuntpodcast.com.
At the very least, you guys, we really hope that the next time you watch National Treasure, you see things just a little bit differently. Until then, thank you so much for joining us on our National Treasure Hunt, and we are so excited to take your questions. All right, we see our first hand over here.
Two things. How did you guys get started doing this, and what about National Treasure 3?
All right, and you want to start?
Yes. So how we got started doing this is I got a phone call from Aubrey as I was getting out of the shower. Now, Aubrey doesn't call me very much, or didn't back then, and so I thought something was very wrong. But it turned out she just had an idea for this podcast. So we were college roommates. We went to Ursinus College in the greater Philadelphia area. And yes, thank you. We love that. And in true liberal arts interdisciplinary fashion, we really took that and applied it to National Treasure. It honestly, it was during kind of the lockdown portion of COVID, so we didn't have a lot going on in our extracurricular lives. And Aubrey had this idea, and I jumped on board because
You were skeptical.
I was skeptical, yeah, 100%. But that's my job. I have to rein you back a little bit.
Whatever. Yes. So it all started as the podcast, which we hope you guys will check out. We're actually kicking off our 9th season next week. Thank you so much. And then it grew from there to include the book and the tour as well, because there is such an incredible fandom around these films, and it's really a fun topic to bring people together around, right? There's so many things happening in the world that if we can all come together around learning about history, science, and so many things regarding a movie that we all love, I think that's really, really cool. And about National Treasure 3, sir, thank you so much for asking. I wonder where you got that idea. We have it on very good authority, specifically the director, John Turteltaub, who is a friend. The script is being actively written for National Treasure 3 as we speak. The writer of that script is not Chris Bremner, which everyone thinks is Chris Bremner, the guy who wrote Bad Boys. It's actually Ted Elliott, the guy who wrote all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And he also had a hand in writing both of the first 2 National Treasure films. So we should feel very confident and very good about the hands that the script is currently in. John Turteltaub, when he recently joined our podcast about a month or so ago for a special 20th National Treasure Anniversary edition of our show, he shared a quote that I think you really like him.
Yes, he said, if the script is halfway decent, we're making the film.
Yeah. So, you guys, I don't know about you, but we personally think that the 250th anniversary of the country would be a great time to come out.
We may have mentioned that.
So the short version of the story is, we could feel good about it. It's coming.
Thumbs up.
It's coming. Other questions? Yes, here.
The carving of the brick, did they do that in the studio, or where was that?
The on the roof.
Yeah.
So they actually created a separate facade. So he was on the roof, and they didn't actually film like the carving in a studio. The close-up. It was actually filmed outdoors. They just create a separate facade for it, just like they would create separate facades for like the headstones in the cemetery, because there's a lot of shooting that's happening.
Nobody was actually carving into like the pillars here. No.
No historical monument was harmed in the making.
That was very important.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are the scenes in New York filmed in the actual Trinity Church?
That's a great question. So there are two principal areas where we film in New York. One of them is purportedly Trinity Church, and one of them is the USS Intrepid. If anyone has visited, we actually visited last summer.
Yes.
So the exterior scenes of Trinity Church are filmed in New York City. However, the interiors were filmed at a church in Los Angeles. If you've been to Trinity Church, you will absolutely notice that
Yeah, you
this is
can
not
tell.
Trinity Church, because there's a very characteristic mantelpiece in the church that you do not see in the film. The USS Intrepid scene, however, that was completely filmed at the USS Intrepid, and they did have a stuntman jump off of that ship. Yeah, into the Hudson, which gross. Yes, Tim.
You mentioned that you guys do DC walking tours. Have you ever thought about doing one in Philly?
You know what? This is probably the third or fourth time just this year we've been asked that question. The question was, do we ever do tours in Philly? And the answer is not currently, but it is on our to-do list. So when we sign copies of our book, as you leave, we also have a mailing list. If you want to sign up, you will be the first to know if and when we establish a Philadelphia walking tour. We hope to see you then.
Yes.
What is the weirdest or funniest or interaction you've had because you do this?
Oh.
I mean that David Diane Fisher story, honestly, that was a little shocking.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, for me, it's been the email exchanges that we have with John Turteltaub, the director. He's very sassy, and we've talked to him enough now that we kind of know how to read the sarcasm, but it always comes off like, at first we're like, wait, is he mad? No, he's good. We're good. And so I think that, for me at least, it just brings, whenever I see that come in the inbox, it brings like a little joy to my day.
My answer to that's a really good one. That's very true. My answer to that would be, a couple of years ago, I don't know if anyone here watched National Treasure: Edge of History on Disney Plus. It was the new spin-off show that they released starting in late 2022. It was around Thanksgiving and in 2022, and I'm with my family. I think you're probably with your family. And I know I'm personally at dinner, and I get this frantic string of text messages from Emily saying, "Check your email." And I checked my email, and we had received an invitation to the premiere of Edge of History. And then the following week, we got an email from Disney PR saying, "Do you want to come cover the red carpet?" And so we got to cover the red carpet premiere for Edge of History and interview Catherine Zeta-Jones, and it was a wild time.
That was, to be fair, that is a really good one. Yes, thank you.
We hope we are there again. Yes, right here.
In National Treasure 3, is it most likely to be about age 47?
Such a good question.
That is a fantastic question. So we ask John Turteltaub this every time we have him on the podcast, or honestly email him. So he has told us that page 47 will be involved, right? They can't not talk about page 47, right? That's why people want to come back. Well, that, and I guess Nick Cage and
Obviously.
all of them. But yes, page 47 will be part of it. Now, we've asked him how much a part of it is going to be, or what is on page 47 and that kind of stuff. He has told us that it is something life-altering, which, they do say in the film as well.
Movie.
So it is likely that page 47 will be in there. I don't know if I don't think it's going to be the entirety of the film, but I think that maybe it'll be the first clue in the treasure hunt that they end up going on in the film.
I'll also share that we recently released a podcast episode featuring actor Bruce Greenwood. You might know him from The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix, or the movie from the early 2000s, JFK.
Or the president in National Treasure 2.
There it is. So he is very keen to return to the third film if there's a way to fit him in, especially surrounding this President's Secret Book idea, since he really is the character that's responsible for the mystery, right? So lots of potential there. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Do you think there'll be any crossover between the third movie and the Disney Channel show?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I think a lot of people suspected that if the Disney Plus show was a little bit more successful, got renewed for a second season, etc., that it might have sort of forced Disney's hand to kind of make a crossover. But even from the get-go, even when we were at the premiere for Edge of History, when we talked to John Turteltaub then, we talked to the showrunners, Marianne and Cormac Wibberley from the show. They were also screenwriters on the first two films. There was never really an intent for there to be a crossover, and that remains true today. Okay, I got a couple, so we'll go here, here, here.
Yeah, two parts.
Sure.
One, Emily, what's your obsession with Riley? And two, what over your journey of doing this, what's been the coolest thing for you to learn or discover?
Oh, great questions. My obsession with Riley, I mean, I always love an underdog, and I feel like Riley is kind of the underdog in the story a little bit. He's also the comedic relief, and people can attest otherwise, but I feel like that's my main job in most aspects of life, is to be kind of the comedic relief. So I feel like I identify very strongly with Riley, and I also know things, but I'm not always super confident in what I know, and I feel like you see that in Riley, right? Like a ton in the films. So I think that's and like justice for Riley. I want him to have his moments. I really like him. Yeah.
Fair enough. And then to the second question, what is the most interesting or our favorite thing that we've learned in this process? It is really, really hard to pick just one thing. It's so hard. I would say that anytime we have the opportunity to talk to a crew or cast member from the films, or even from the show, because we've interviewed several cast members from the show as well, we're always able to uncover little bits and pieces of things like scenes that were cut out, or an interpretation of a character that was a little bit different. One of the most interesting interviews we've done with not a cast member was actually the book prop designer, so the person who designed the President's Secret book for National Treasure 2. And learning about how that book was created, with every single page has writing on it, you guys. Every page has not just writing, but imprints or versions of each president's handwriting for high fidelity purposes. There's actual writings from those presidents in there, so that it looks realistic. And then all the inserts that went into the book. You know, there are so many photographs and pamphlets and things like that. And then it turns out there were 3 copies of that book, because they would keep like breaking it, and so they would need to send it back, and so they need a new copy to film with until they broke that one, and then, you know, it was just a constant cycle. So learning about the production aspects and how much care went into things as basic as that prop was something that I really appreciated learning about. We had a question here, and then we'll go back over here.
Since Disney owns both franchises, are we going to find out that Benjamin Franklin Gates was a student of Indiana Jones?
Ooh!
I've actually not heard that before.
I've never heard that one either. It's a great question. I mean, we have a whole part of our book, episodes of our podcast, etc., where we assess the like critique and comparison of pitting the two franchises against each other, which we think is like really unfounded in a lot of ways. Also, Charles Seegers, in addition to the story we gave you about the National Archives, he loved Raiders of the Lost Ark and wanted to see another one. And so that was definitely a piece of pride and inspiration for him when people started comparing the two. So I don't think we're necessarily going to see a crossover, but gosh, would I like to see a part of like Disney World or Epcot have like a National Treasure ride. I mean, they've got merch for Indiana Jones, they got a ride for Indiana Jones.
They have a torch. A plastic light up torch. Okay, and it's marketed as Indiana Jones. Okay, Ben Franklin Gates carried one of them around. They have a leather jacket marketed as Indiana Jones. Ben Franklin Gates wears a leather. Sorry, I was in Disney World recently, and this was like, I looked in every store and could not find anything, and it broke my heart every time. Oh, I'm okay. Thank you.
We had a question here.
Just
Aubrey.
real quick before we answer, I think we had 2 last questions.
Yes.
I just want to make sure people have time to get their books signed.
Gotcha.
if they want. So we'll end with these last 2 questions.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go here.
You mentioned how historically accurate the first one is, and how they took some liberties as well, like the sounds of good letters. Was there a specific story like that in the second one as well, like the rest of the cast?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, such a good question. So the question is, what sort of historical accuracies versus liberties were taken in the second movie? And we do go through pretty much every historical moment from both films, like I said, in our book. But what always stands out to me from the second movie is how the story of the Resolute desks and the HMS Resolute that gets told in the second movie is, again, 98% accurate. The only inaccuracy in that story, the way it is told in National Treasure, is that there weren't 2 Resolute desks formed from the timbers of the HMS Resolute. There were 3. And so they omit the third one probably for clarity and ease, right, for the plot. So the third one, that's a great question, was gifted to the widow of a man who had financed a bunch of rescue expeditions for a British explorer who had gotten lost in the Arctic. It's currently located in a whaling museum, I'm pretty sure in Massachusetts. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. There's a lot more to dive into there, but I always
We can definitely talk to you more about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then last
question.
In case there's never a part 3, why does the president need Benjamin Gates to look up a page of the book that's in the Library of Congress if it's his book?
I think he really just wants to know if Ben can help him solve whatever problem is on that page. And just to maybe entice you to take a look at our book, there may or may not be a message hidden in our book from John Turteltaub with a little more detail about page 47.
Good God, way to transition us.
Thank you all so much. You have been awesome.
Yes, thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to the Trust for putting this event on along with our park. As we mentioned, Emily and Aubrey will be available to sign any books. If you would like to buy one today, that is also available in the back over here. And as they said, follow their podcast, give it a listen. They have listeners in over 97 countries, so a few more won't hurt, right? All right, well, thank you for coming today.